If Anakin Skywalker had never turned to the dark side, the Star Wars universe would have taken a drastically different path. Here's a possible alternate storyline where he remains a Jedi and never becomes Darth Vader. Anakin Skywalker stood before the Jedi Council, the tension in the chamber so thick it could be cut with a lightsaber. He had just returned from rescuing Chancellor Palpatine from General Grievous' ship. His bravery, skill, and power were undeniable. Mace Windu spoke first. His voice was measured, but the weight of the decision was clear. Anakin Skywalker, you have shown strength, loyalty, and leadership beyond your years. The Council recognizes your achievements, and grants you the rank of Jedi Master. Time stood still. Anakin's eyes widened. For a moment, he said nothing. He had long desired this moment, not for status, but for respect. For trust. He bowed deeply, his voice firm. Thank you, Masters. I will serve with honor. Obi-Wan Kenobi smiled. Yoda closed his eyes, nodding slowly. The council chamber, once filled with hesitation, was now filled with something new. Hope. This small but powerful shift in Anakin's life changed everything. With the council's full trust, Anakin no longer felt isolated. The whispers of fear and betrayal that once echoed in his mind began to fade. Palpatine's grip over him loosened. When the Chancellor tried to sway him again with dark promises, Anakin listened, but questioned. You speak of power, Chancellor, Anakin said carefully, but power without peace means nothing. Palpatine's face darkened. But Anakin didn't flinch. Instead of reporting Palpatine in secret, he brought the matter to the council openly. With the strength of a Jedi Master behind his words, the council acted swiftly. Mace Windu, Yoda, and Anakin confronted Palpatine before he could execute Order 66. The battle was fierce. But together, they were stronger. In the end, it was Anakin, his lightsaber steady, his heart clear, who stood above the fallen Sith Lord. He had chosen the light. Not because he was told to. But because he believed in it. And in that moment, Anakin Skywalker didn't just avoid becoming Darth Vader. He became something greater. A Jedi Master. A true guardian of peace in the galaxy. And for the first time in a long time, the Force was in balance. The fall of Palpatine sent shockwaves across the galaxy. Without his shadow cast over the Republic, a sense of stillness returned. The Jedi Temple, once filled with quiet tension, began to breathe again. Chancellor Bail Organa was swiftly appointed as interim leader, restoring faith in the Republic's future. The Senate no longer bowed to fear. They listened. They reasoned. They hoped. Anakin Skywalker, now a Jedi Master, stood beside Obi-Wan Kenobi as a symbol of renewed strength and balance. The war wasn't over yet, but it was changing. Without Palpatine manipulating both sides, the Separatists began to fracture. Count Dooku, left without his master's grand design, grew uncertain. And in that space of hesitation, the Jedi moved. Diplomatic missions replaced covert operations. Peace negotiations began. The clone army, once used as pawns in a Sith game, now took a different role, defending vulnerable systems, not invading them. Yoda led talks with neutral systems. Obi-Wan returned to the front lines, not to fight, but to offer terms of surrender. And Anakin, he did what few Jedi ever dared. He visited planets ravaged by war. He sat with children who had lost everything. He listened. He wept. And through this, the galaxy began to see Anakin not just as a warrior, but as a protector. Padme Amidala watched from afar, her heart full of pride. She had feared what power would do to Anakin. But now, she saw a man shaped by purpose, not ego. Their love remained a secret. But in the quiet corners of Coruscant, under the stars, they dreamed of peace. The Jedi Council, once divided, found unity. Mace Windu admitted he had misjudged the boy. Yoda sensed that the darkness surrounding the Chosen One had lifted. There was still work to do. But for the first time in years, there was light. Across the galaxy, battles began to end. Commanders laid down their weapons. Worlds opened their doors. And the Republic stood, not as an empire rising in shadow, but as a beacon of hope. All because one man made the right choice. And that choice echoed through the stars. Padme Amidala sat in her apartment, her hand resting gently over her growing stomach. The galaxy had changed. The war was fading. The darkness she once feared had not claimed the man she loved. Anakin Skywalker had remained in the light. And now, so much was possible. No more secrets. No more lies. She watched the news feeds each night. She saw Anakin speaking to the Senate on behalf of peaceful reconstruction. She heard whispers among senators, of his strength, his wisdom, and how he had stopped the fall of the Republic with a single choice. But for Padme, he was not a legend. He was her husband. And the father of their unborn children. She remembered how they had feared the future. She remembered how Anakin had been haunted by visions. Visions of her death. Visions of pain and fire. But those visions never came to pass. Because Anakin didn't fall. Because he chose love over fear. The Jedi didn't exile him. They embraced him. Master Yoda even visited her one evening, offering gentle words and asking nothing in return. Padme wept after he left. Not because she was afraid. But because the Jedi were no longer hiding from compassion. They were embracing it. Anakin returned to her often now, not in secret, but in peace. They would walk together through the gardens, hand in hand, guarded by silence and stars. He would speak to her belly and laugh. "I think it's a girl," he said once, smiling. Padme shook her head. "Twins." He blinked. "Force help us." And they both laughed. She could feel it now. Hope. Real, living hope. Not the fragile kind born in desperate times. But the kind that grows when fear is defeated. The Jedi Order was changing. The Republic was healing. And Padme Amidala, once a voice crying against war, could finally rest. Not because the galaxy was perfect. But because the man she loved had chosen to rise. Instead of fall. And in that decision, he saved her life. And the lives of the children still waiting to be born. The Jedi Council chamber was quiet. Sunlight poured through the high windows of the temple, casting long shadows on the floor. Anakin Skywalker stood at the center once more. But this time, not as the brash young knight seeking approval. This time, as a Jedi master bringing a vision for change. The war had shown them many things. The old Jedi code, once rigid and untouched, had begun to crack under the weight of real suffering. Attachment had always been forbidden. Emotion was to be suppressed. But now, even Master Yoda had begun to question those rules. Anakin spoke gently. "Masters, we lost too much by turning away from the people we swore to protect." He looked around the circle. "We taught children to fear love. To hide from grief. To be Jedi, but never truly be alive." Mace Windu said nothing. He watched. He listened. Anakin continued. "We can still follow the light. We can still serve the Force. But we must be human, too. We must feel, not fear." There was a silence. A long one. But then, to Anakin's surprise, Obi-Wan Kenobi nodded. "Perhaps it is time we stop clinging to ancient fears." Even Master Plo Koon agreed. The council did not move quickly. It never had. But seeds were being planted. A new Jedi code was taking shape. One built not on denial, but on understanding. Compassion would no longer be seen as weakness. Love would not be shamed. Jedi could still live by discipline. But not at the cost of their souls. In the weeks that followed, quiet changes began. Younglings were allowed to ask deeper questions. Knights spoke openly of the pain they had carried in silence. The Order began to breathe again. To evolve. And at the heart of that transformation stood Anakin Skywalker. Not just a warrior. Not just a hero. But a teacher. A symbol. Proof that one could love deeply. And still walk in the light. And because of him. The Jedi were no longer afraid to feel. The Jedi Temple nursery had never seen anything like it. Two small infants, a boy and a girl, slept peacefully in the soft blue light of the chamber. Luke and Leia Skywalker. Born in secret. Now safe. Alive. Anakin Skywalker stood over them, his eyes filled with wonder. Beside him, Padme Amidala watched in silence, her hand gently resting on his. Obi-Wan Kenobi entered quietly. He looked at the twins, then at Anakin. "They're strong in the Force," he said softly. Anakin nodded. "I feel it too." There had been debates within the Jedi Council. Should the children be trained? Should they be raised as Jedi? Or be given a normal life, away from the pressure of destiny? But Master Yoda had made a rare exception. "Let the future come to them," he had said. "They will choose their own path." And so, Luke and Leia were raised in balance. Not hidden. Not feared. They were loved. Anakin didn't train them as warriors. He taught them to listen. To breathe. To respect the living Force. Padme told them stories of Naboo. Obi-Wan visited often, bringing small holocrons filled with ancient Jedi knowledge. The children laughed. They played. They grew. And the galaxy watched in awe. For these were the children of the man who saved the Republic. But no one dared to call them chosen. Anakin refused it. "They are not weapons," he told the council. "They are light." And they were. As they grew, their connection to the Force bloomed like fireflies in the dark. Luke was curious and quiet. Leia was sharp and brave. Together, they brought a calmness wherever they walked. Even old masters smiled when they entered the chamber. Because in them, they saw not just a future. But healing. The scars of war began to fade. The temple halls felt warmer. And through these children, a new generation of Jedi would one day rise. Not to fight. But to guide. And in the heart of it all, Anakin Skywalker stood with his family. Whole. Present. Redeemed not through power. But through love. The sands of Tatooine blew quietly across the rocks outside a small hut. Inside, two Jedi sat at a wooden table. Anakin Skywalker. And Obi-Wan Kenobi. No lightsabers. No battle. Just old friends sharing tea. Years had passed since the fall of Palpatine. The war was over. The galaxy was rebuilding. But some wounds remained. And so, Anakin had come here, to Obi-Wan's retreat, to talk, not as warriors, not as generals, but as brothers. Obi-Wan looked at him, a small smile on his face. "You've changed," he said softly. Anakin nodded. "So have you." There had once been a time when they stood across from each other with blades drawn. In another life, in another fate. But that day on Mustafar never came. Because Anakin had made a different choice. And Obi-Wan had never needed to raise his weapon. Now, they spoke of the children. Of Luke's quiet wisdom. Of Leia's fierce compassion. Of Padme's strength. And of the Jedi Order, healing, growing, learning from its past. "I never thought I'd live to see it," Obi-Wan admitted. Jedi loving without fear. Anakin looked at the horizon. Maybe the code was never wrong. Just, incomplete. They sat in silence for a moment, listening to the wind. No tension. No regrets. Just peace. They had walked through darkness. But together, they found their way back to the light. When it was time to leave, Obi-Wan stood and reached for Anakin's shoulder. "I'm proud of you, Anakin." The words caught him off guard. For a second, he felt like the boy who once doubted his place. But now, he knew who he was. "I'm proud of us," Anakin replied. And with that, he stepped out into the twin suns, his cloak rising in the wind. Two Jedi. Still walking the same path. Side by side. Not divided by destiny. But united by choice. In the shadows of the unknown regions, far beyond the edge of Republic maps, something stirred. The death of Darth Sidious had left a void in the dark side of the Force. And darkness does not fade quietly. It waits. It watches. And it learns. On a forgotten moon, a new presence emerged. Not Sith. Not Jedi. But something ancient. Something twisted. Whispers reached the outer rim, systems falling silent, patrols vanishing, strange disturbances in the Force. Anakin Skywalker felt it first. A cold pull. A warning. The council gathered. Even Master Yoda grew silent, sensing the shift. "The dark side, not gone, it is," he said quietly. "Another rises." Anakin volunteered without hesitation. He would investigate. But he would not go alone. Obi-Wan Kenobi and Ahsoka Tano joined him. 3 Jedi. 3 voices of the light. Together, they traveled into the unknown. What they found was not a single enemy, but a new cult, children twisted by fear, trained in ancient teachings, worshipping shadows that lived before the Sith. They called it the Void. Led by a masked figure who claimed to speak to the Force itself. This being had no name. Only power. But it feared Anakin. "You were meant to fall," it hissed. "And yet here you stand, unbroken." The battle was long. Strange. Wounds were not just physical. They fought illusions, doubts, and visions of pain. But through it all, Anakin held on to the light. He remembered Padme's voice. He remembered Luke and Leia's laughter. He remembered who he was. And that memory became his strength. In the end, the void collapsed, not by brute force, but by truth. Anakin reached into the heart of its leader and showed him mercy. The darkness retreated. Not destroyed. But reminded of the light's resilience. As they returned to Coruscant, the Jedi knew the galaxy would always have shadows. But now, it had guardians ready to face them. Not with fear. But with clarity. And in every corner of the stars. The Force whispered balance. Anakin Skywalker stood before the Jedi Temple's high hall. But not as a warrior returning from battle. Today, he stood as a teacher. As a voice for the future. The chamber was filled with Jedi of all ranks, younglings, knights, masters, all listening. Not to orders. But to something deeper. To change. Anakin looked out over them, his cloak hanging gently at his sides. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't demand. He simply spoke. For too long, we feared emotion. For too long, we buried pain and called it peace. He paused, letting the silence breathe. We must remember that the Force is not only power, it is presence. Connection. Life. Master Windu stood at the edge of the crowd, arms crossed, silent. Even he was listening now. The Jedi Order had begun to shift. Because Anakin had shown them another path. A path that did not ask Jedi to be perfect. Only present. A new Jedi code was being written. Not on stone. but in the hearts of those who had lived through war, loss, and rebirth. It welcomed truth. It honored love. It taught the Jedi how to grieve without losing the light. Younglings were now allowed to speak freely about their attachments. Knights returned from missions not with silence, but with stories, real stories, of fear, courage, and compassion. Obi-Wan helped draft the new teachings. Yoda guided it with patience. But it was Anakin's journey that gave it weight. Because he had walked the edge of darkness. And chose the light. And now, Jedi were no longer just defenders of peace. They were keepers of balance. Not just in the galaxy. But within themselves. As the sun set across the temple spires, Anakin walked through the halls with his daughter in his arms. Leia's small hands gripped his robes. She looked up at the Jedi passing by and smiled. And they smiled back. Because through Anakin, they had learned a truth long forgotten. That to feel. To love. To fall and rise again. Was not weakness. It was the Force, alive within them. The stars above Mandalore burned brightly in the night sky. Anakin Skywalker stood on a cliff, gazing at the city below. The fires of war had gone out, and the people were rebuilding. Beside him stood Bo-Katan Kryze, the leader of the Mandalorian people. Once, they had fought alongside the Jedi. Then, they had fallen into chaos. But now, the galaxy was shifting. And with Anakin's guidance, old enemies were becoming allies. The Jedi were no longer isolated. They were reaching out. Listening. And the Mandalorians, fierce, proud, loyal, responded. Bo-Katan broke the silence. "We are not Jedi," she said. "But we will stand with you." Anakin nodded. "I don't want another war. I want peace, built by those who know what it costs." She extended her hand. And for the first time in decades, a Jedi and a Mandalorian sealed an alliance, not in blood, but in trust. The Jedi Council watched this new union with cautious hope. Yoda approved, though he knew the risks. But Anakin believed it was time. Time for unity. Time for strength shared across systems, not ruled by fear, but built on respect. Mandalore became more than a warrior planet. It became a bridge between worlds. A symbol. And as the Republic evolved, so did its defenders. New Jedi were trained not only in the temple, but in the wild places where people truly lived. Anakin traveled often, never ruling, only guiding. He taught diplomacy where others taught control. He showed that peace came not through domination, but through understanding. Luke and Leia, now young Padawans, followed in his steps. They learned from Mandalorian warriors, from farmers on Naboo, from elders on Kashyyyk. They learned that balance is not stillness. It is movement. It is listening. It is change. And everywhere they went, they heard stories. Of the Jedi who had once fallen. But never did. Of the man who was once a danger to the galaxy. But became its hope. Anakin Skywalker. Jedi Master. Father. Bridge between worlds. And proof that even in a galaxy torn by fear, one choice could reshape the stars.